The morning began like any other at Mason Tech headquarters, the gleaming 40-story tower that dominated the downtown skyline. Inside the executive suite on the 40th floor, CEO Robert Mason stood before floor-to-ceiling windows, surveying his empire. The company he had built from nothing now commanded a market value of $12 billion, serving over 3 million clients across 70 countries. At 52, Robert had earned his reputation as the man who never lost, the executive who could solve any problem, navigate any crisis. His silver hair, expensive suit, and cold blue eyes had graced the covers of business magazines a dozen times. But on this particular Tuesday morning in late September, everything he had built was about to collapse. The first alarm sounded at 9:47. Then another. Then a cascade of alerts that turned into a deafening chorus of system failures. In the operations center 3 floors below, engineers stared at their screens in disbelief, as the central database began corrupting itself, line by line, file by file. Customer data vanished. Financial records scrambled. Active transactions froze mid-process. The massive display screen in the executive boardroom flashed angry red text against a black background. System failure. Critical error. Data loss imminent. Within 20 minutes, the stock price had dropped 18%. Within an hour, news networks were broadcasting live from outside the building. Shareholders flooded the phone lines with threats of lawsuits. Inside the operations center, 37 of the industry's top engineers stood helpless before walls of cascading error codes that made no sense. They had seen system crashes before, but nothing like this. It was as if the entire infrastructure had been hit by some invisible plague, corrupting everything it touched. And nobody, not one person in that room full of experts, could figure out why. Robert sat motionless in his leather chair, watching his life's work disintegrate in real time. The morning sunlight streaming through the windows suddenly felt harsh and accusatory. His chief technology officer, a man who had managed systems for 3 different Fortune 500 companies, stood before him with empty hands and emptier promises. The words echoed in Robert's mind, hollow and useless. "We're doing everything we can." But everything they could do amounted to nothing. Zero. The system was dying, and they were just watching it happen. For the first time in his career, Robert Mason felt genuine fear. Not the calculated risk-taking that came with bold business moves, but raw, primal terror at the possibility of total loss. His company employed over 8,000 people. Millions of clients trusted them with sensitive data. Partners depended on their infrastructure for daily operations. And it was all crumbling. He leaned forward, elbows on the mahogany desk his grandfather had used, and whispered words he had never spoken before. "We're finished." 3 floors below, in a break room most executives never visited, a woman named Linda wiped down the counters with practiced efficiency. She had worked at Mason Tech for 11 years, arriving each morning at 6 to clean offices before the staff arrived. At 43, her hands showed the wear of hard labor, but her face still held a gentle warmth that made people feel at ease. Most employees barely noticed her. She was part of the invisible workforce that kept buildings running smoothly while others claimed the glory. Linda had learned long ago to be content with her position, to take pride in honest work, even if others looked down on it. Her real pride, her true treasure, was her son. Jamal had turned 14 3 weeks earlier. He was a quiet kid, tall for his age but thin, with thoughtful eyes that absorbed everything around him. While other teenagers played video games for fun, Jamal played with code. He had taught himself programming at age 10 using free videos and borrowed textbooks from the library. His bedroom, a small converted closet in their apartment, was lined with notebooks filled with handwritten algorithms and system designs. The laptop he used was 6 years old, held together with electrical tape, but to Jamal it was a gateway to infinite possibilities. He dreamed in Python and JavaScript, thought in logic flows and data structures. Today, like most days, Jamal had tagged along with his mother to work. School had a half-day for teacher meetings, and Linda could not afford childcare. The arrangement worked well enough. Jamal would sit in the break room with his laptop, working through online coding challenges while his mother cleaned offices. The executives barely noticed him. If they did, they saw just another kid, probably playing games, definitely not worth their attention. But Jamal was paying attention. He always paid attention. Mason Tech had been built on innovation in cloud infrastructure management. Robert Mason had recognized early that the future belonged to distributed systems, to networks that could scale infinitely and recover from any failure. He had hired the best engineers money could buy, invested hundreds of millions in cutting-edge technology, and created a platform that major corporations relied on for their most critical operations. The company's reputation rested on one simple promise. Their systems never went down. Never. Until today, the operations center had become a war room. Engineers shouted commands across rows of workstations. Screens displayed incomprehensible strings of error messages. The lead architect, a brilliant woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, who had designed redundancy protocols for NASA, stood at the main console looking utterly defeated. She had tried everything. Rebooting servers. Rolling back to previous configurations. Isolating corrupted segments. Nothing worked. In fact, every intervention seemed to make things worse. It was as if the system had become actively hostile, resisting every attempt at repair. In the boardroom, Robert faced his board of directors. 9 faces stared back at him, some angry, some fearful, all demanding answers he could not provide. The chairman, an elderly venture capitalist who had backed Robert's original startup 20 years ago, spoke in clipped, furious tones. "You promised this could never happen. You built your entire brand on reliability. Do you understand what this means? We're hemorrhaging money by the second. Clients are terminating contracts. Our credibility is destroyed." Robert had no defense. Everything the chairman said was true. The company's value was evaporating like water in the desert Sunday. Insurance might cover some losses, but reputation could not be rebuilt with money alone. Some things, once broken, stayed broken. He thought about the 8,000 employees who would lose their jobs if Mason Tech collapsed. He thought about the families depending on those paychecks. He thought about his own family, his legacy, everything he had sacrificed to build this empire. The weight of it crushed him. Outside the boardroom, through the glass walls, he could see the operations center. Engineers moved with increasing desperation, their body language screaming failure. One young programmer actually broke down crying at his terminal. The sight made Robert's chest tighten. These were good people. Talented people. They had done everything right. But sometimes, doing everything right still was not enough. A junior administrator burst through the door, her face pale. "Sir, the backup systems are failing too. Whatever is causing this, it is spreading. We have maybe 90 minutes before total data loss becomes irreversible." 90 minutes. 5,400 seconds. Each one ticking away another piece of his life's work. The board erupted in chaos. Voices overlapped, accusations flew, and Robert barely heard any of it. He was thinking about his father, a factory worker who had died young from lung disease, who had sacrificed everything so Robert could attend college. He was thinking about the promise he had made at his father's funeral, to build something that mattered, something that lasted. He was thinking about how badly he had failed. Linda had been cleaning the executive washroom when she first heard the commotion. At first, she assumed it was just another high-pressure meeting. The executives were always stressed, always shouting about deadlines and market shares. But as she moved through the floor with her cleaning cart, she realized this was different. People were panicking. She saw grown men with tears in their eyes. She heard words like catastrophe and bankruptcy. The fear in the air was thick enough to taste. She found Jamal in the break room, exactly where she had left him, hunched over his ancient laptop. For a moment, she considered telling him to pack up, to leave before whatever disaster was unfolding touched them. They were not part of this world. They cleaned it and serviced it, but they did not belong to it. Other people's crises were not their problem. But Jamal had noticed too. He had noticed everything. For the past 2 hours, while chaos erupted around him, Jamal had been watching the network traffic flowing through Mason Tech systems. He had not meant to breach anything. He was just curious about how their infrastructure worked, and the guest Wi-Fi happened to offer a window into the external monitoring dashboard. What he saw there fascinated and horrified him. The error patterns were not random. They followed a logic, a terrible and elegant logic, that reminded him of something he had read about in an advanced cybersecurity article. It was a recursive corruption attack. Someone had inserted malicious code deep in the system architecture. Code designed to replicate and mutate, to spread through the network like a virus while disguising itself as legitimate processes. Traditional security could not catch it because it kept changing shape. Standard recovery procedures would not work because the corruption had already embedded itself in the backup systems. Every attempt to fix it would just activate more sleeping copies of the attack code. Jamal's heart pounded as the implications sank in. This was not just a system crash. This was sabotage. Sophisticated, brutal sabotage from someone who understood Mason Tech's infrastructure intimately. And from what he could see, the company's engineers were approaching the problem completely wrong. They were treating it like a technical failure when they should have been treating it like an infection. He knew how to stop it. The solution blazed clear in his mind, a path through the maze that nobody else could see. But he was just a kid. A 14-year-old kid whose mother cleaned toilets in this building. Who was he to think he knew better than engineers with advanced degrees and decades of experience? The fear of being wrong paralyzed him. The fear of being laughed at. The fear of making things worse. He stared at his screen, at the solution forming in his mind, and felt utterly small. Linda appeared beside him. She looked worried. "Baby, we might need to leave. Something bad is happening." Jamal looked up at his mother. She had given him everything. She worked brutal hours for modest pay so he could have a chance at a better life. She never complained, never asked for recognition, never expected the world to be fair. She just loved him and worked and hoped. The thought of disappointing her, of embarrassing her in front of these powerful people, made his stomach churn. But another thought pushed through the fear. If he stayed silent, and the company collapsed, 8,000 people would lose their jobs. People like his mother. People who worked hard and deserved better. He thought about the janitors and cafeteria workers and security guards who would be out on the street, hunting for new positions in a tough economy. He thought about their families. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe his solution would not work. But maybe it would. And if there was even a chance, even the smallest possibility that he could help, did he not have a responsibility to try? Jamal stood up. His legs felt shaky, his mouth dry. "Mom, I need to talk to someone." Linda frowned. "Talk to who?" "Baby, this isn't our business. I think I know how to fix their system." The words hung in the air between them. Linda stared at her son, confusion and concern warring on her face. "What are you talking about? You're 14 years old." "I know. But I've been watching their network. I understand what's wrong. Mom, if nobody stops this, the whole company is going to collapse. All these people will lose their jobs. People like you." Linda's expression shifted. She knew her son was brilliant. She had watched him teach himself things that amazed her. Solve problems that seemed impossible. But this was different. This was the real world, where a mistake could have catastrophic consequences, where a black kid from the wrong side of town would not get the benefit of the doubt. "Jamal. These people have experts. Engineers who went to fancy schools. You really think they're going to listen to you?" "Probably not," Jamal admitted. "But I have to try." The determination in his eyes reminded Linda of his father, a good man who had died when Jamal was only 3. His father had believed in standing up for what was right, even when it cost him. Especially when it cost him. Looking at her son now, Linda saw that same courage, and it broke her heart even as it filled her with pride. She took a deep breath. "Okay. Let's go." They made their way to the operations center. The hallway seemed impossibly long. With each step, Jamal felt his confidence wavering. Who was he kidding? These were professionals. They had resources he could only dream of. They would laugh him out of the room. But his feet kept moving. The operations center doors were open, people rushing in and out with frantic energy. Jamal and Linda slipped inside, and for a moment nobody noticed them. Everyone was too focused on the screens, displaying cascading failures. The atmosphere was thick with desperation. Dr. Chen stood at the central console, running another diagnostic that Jamal could tell would fail. She was looking in the wrong place. They all were. It would be like trying to cure cancer by putting a bandage on the skin. Jamal's voice came out quieter than he intended. "Excuse me." Nobody heard him. The room was too loud, too chaotic. He tried again, louder. "Excuse me." A few people turned. The expressions that landed on him ranged from confusion to irritation. A black kid and a cleaning lady, standing in the middle of their crisis. One engineer, a young man with a wireless headset, waved them away. "This area is restricted. You need to leave." "Please," Jamal said, his voice cracking slightly. "I think I know what's wrong with your system." The room did not go silent. That only happened in movies. Instead, a few people chuckled. One woman actually rolled her eyes. "Dr. Chen barely glanced over, her attention still fixed on her failing diagnostics. "Son, we don't have time for this. Security, can we get some help here?" Linda's hand tightened on Jamal's shoulder. She was preparing to pull him away, to save him from further humiliation. But Jamal stepped forward, his voice stronger now. "It's a recursive corruption attack. Your system isn't crashing, it's being actively sabotaged. Every time you try to fix it, you're just activating more copies of the malicious code." That got attention. Dr. Chen looked up fully, her eyes narrowing. "What did you just say?" "The error patterns. They're not random. They're following a replication algorithm. Someone inserted code into your base architecture that mutates and spreads. Your standard recovery protocols are making it worse because the attack code has already infected your backups." Several engineers were staring now. Dr. Chen walked over, studying Jamal with new intensity. How do you know about our recovery protocols? I don't. Not specifically. But I can see the traffic patterns from the external monitoring dashboard. The way the failures are cascading, the timing of the corruptions, it all points to a recursive attack. One of the senior engineers, a heavy-set man with thinning hair, let out a harsh laugh. This is absurd. We're taking advice from a kid now? I've been doing this for 23 years. If there was a recursive attack, we would have detected it. Would you? Jamal's voice was steady now, confidence building. When did your intrusion detection last update its signature database? This type of attack uses polymorphic code. It changes shape faster than traditional security can track. That's why your systems can't see it. You're looking for a threat that looks like threats you've seen before. But this is different. Dr. Chen's expression had shifted from irritation to cautious interest. She had spent 3 decades in this field. She knew brilliance when she heard it, regardless of what package it came in. What would you do differently? Stop trying to restore from backups. They're already infected. Instead, you need to isolate the core system, identify the original insertion point of the malicious code, and build a targeted counter-algorithm that can recognize and neutralize the mutations. Then you can do a clean rebuild from a point before the infection started. The heavy-set engineer scoffed. Oh, is that all? Just isolate the core, build a counter-algorithm, and do a clean rebuild? Kid, do you have any idea how complex our system is? What you're describing would take weeks, even if you were right. You don't have weeks, Jamal said simply. You have about an hour before the data loss becomes permanent. Dr. Chen glanced at the countdown timer on the main screen. 53 minutes remaining. She looked back at Jamal, studying him with the intensity of someone trying to solve a puzzle. How old are you? 14. Where did you learn about recursive corruption attacks? I read about them. And I practice coding every day. I'm not saying I know more than you. I'm just saying I can see something that maybe you're too close to see. Sometimes an outside perspective helps. The room had gone quieter now. Other engineers were listening, though most still wore skeptical expressions. This was insane. A teenager with a battered laptop claiming he could solve a problem that had defeated their entire expert team. It was the kind of story that would be laughable if the situation were not so dire. But Dr. Chen was not laughing. She had worked with enough prodigies over the years to recognize genuine understanding when she heard it. The kid was not showing off or repeating things he had memorized. He was analyzing in real time, making connections, seeing patterns. His diagnosis actually made sense. More sense than anything her team had come up with. Still, letting a 14-year-old touch their system? The liability alone would be astronomical. She made a decision. What's your name? Jamal. Jamal Carter. Okay, Jamal. I appreciate your input. We'll look into the recursive attack possibility. But we can't let you actually work on the system. You understand that, right? Liability, security protocols, all of that. Jamal nodded, disappointment clear on his face. He had expected this. I understand. Linda gently pulled him toward the door. They had tried. That was all they could do. As they turned to leave, Jamal cast one last look at the screens displaying those cascading failures, and his mind continued working the problem, solving it in the background even as his feet carried him away. They had almost reached the hallway when an alarm blared. New, louder, more urgent than before. Everyone in the operations center froze as the main screen updated. Critical threshold exceeded. Core data corruption at 67%. Estimated time to total loss. 34 minutes. The timeline had accelerated. Whatever was attacking the system had just shifted into a higher gear. Dr. Chen's face went white. She turned to her team. Initiate emergency shutdown protocols. If we can't fix it, at least we can preserve whatever data is still intact in a frozen state. That won't work, Jamal said from the doorway. His voice cut through the noise with unexpected authority. The moment you try to shut down, the attack code will interpret it as a threat and accelerate the corruption. You'll lose everything in minutes instead of half an hour. How could you possibly know that? The heavy-set engineer demanded. Because that's what I would do if I designed this attack. You want people to panic and make desperate moves. Every desperate move triggers a response. It's elegant, really. Brutal, but elegant. Dr. Chen stood paralyzed by indecision. Every instinct told her to trust the protocols, the procedures, the systems her team had built over years of careful work. But those same systems had failed to prevent this disaster. They had failed to diagnose it. They had failed to stop it. What if this kid, impossible as it seemed, actually understood something they did not. The timer counted down. 33 minutes. 32. Robert Mason appeared in the doorway of the operations center. He looked haggard, 10 years older than he had that morning. Behind him, members of the board clustered, watching the disaster unfold in real time. His voice was hoarse when he spoke. Status? Deteriorating rapidly, sir, Dr. Chen reported. We're implementing emergency protocols. No, Jamal said again, louder. Don't do that. Please. You'll make it worse. Robert's eyes found the teenager. For a long moment, he just stared. Then he looked at Linda, recognition dawning. The cleaning lady. He had seen her around for years, barely registered her existence. And this was her son? This kid who was contradicting his expert team? Under normal circumstances, Robert would have had them both removed. But these were not normal circumstances. These were the end times. His company was dying, his legacy crumbling, and every conventional approach had failed. What did he have to lose by listening to an unconventional voice? Who are you? Robert asked. Jamal Carter, sir. My mom works here. I'm just someone who noticed something your team might have missed. And what did you notice? Jamal explained again, more concisely this time. The recursive attack. The polymorphic code. Why traditional responses would fail. Robert listened with the intense focus of a man with nothing left to lose. When Jamal finished, Robert looked at Dr. Chen. Is what he's saying possible? Dr. Chen hesitated. Professional pride warred with intellectual honesty. Finally, she nodded. Yes. It's possible. I don't know if he's right, but the theory is sound. Robert made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. Give him access. The heavy-set engineer exploded. Sir, you can't be serious. We can't hand our entire system over to a random kid. The liability, the security risks, are meaningless if we don't have a company left to protect, Robert cut him off. His voice carried absolute authority. Dr. Chen, you said every approach has failed. Do you have any other ideas? She opened her mouth. Closed it. Finally shook her head. Robert looked back at Jamal. You said you could fix this. Can you? Jamal felt the weight of every eye in the room. His mother's worried gaze. The skeptical engineers. The desperate CEO. His own doubt whispered that he was crazy, that he would fail spectacularly, that he would be remembered as the kid who thought he was smart enough to save a multi-billion-dollar company, and instead destroyed it completely. But louder than the doubt was the certainty in his mind. He knew what was wrong. He knew how to fix it. And he knew that if he walked away now, he would regret it for the rest of his life. Yes, sir, I can fix it. Robert nodded once. Then do it. You have 30 minutes. The operations center erupted in protests, but Robert silenced them with a look. We're out of options and out of time. Either this works or we're finished anyway. Clear a workstation for him. Now. Engineers scrambled to comply, though several looked mutinous. A terminal at the central console was hastily vacated. Jamal approached it with Linda trailing behind, her hand never leaving his shoulder. She was terrified for him, proud of him, and completely lost in this world of code and chaos. Jamal sat down. The chair was expensive, ergonomic. Nothing like the folding chair he used at home. Multiple monitors surrounded him, displaying more information than he had ever had access to before. For a moment, the sheer scale of it overwhelmed him. This was Mason Tech's entire infrastructure laid bare. Thousands of servers, millions of lines of code, billions of data points. He took a breath. Then he opened his own laptop, that old battered machine held together with tape, and set it beside the workstation. If he was going to do this, he needed his own tools, his own environment. The monitors could show him Mason Tech systems, but his laptop would be his weapon. Show me your system architecture map, he said to Dr. Chen. His voice was steady now, professional. He had a job to do. She pulled it up. A massive diagram sprawled across the screens, showing the interconnected web of databases, servers, and protocols that made Mason Tech function. Jamal studied it, his eyes moving rapidly, building a mental model. He could see the problem now, clear as day. The attack had originated in a relatively minor authentication module, something that had seemed too insignificant to warrant heavy security. From there, it had spread like roots from a tree, reaching into every connected system. Okay, Jamal said. First, we need to partition the system. Create hard barriers between infected segments so the attack can't spread further while I work. That will break functionality across the platform, one engineer objected. The platform is already broken, Jamal countered. This just keeps it from getting worse. Do it. Dr. Chen gave the order. Engineers moved to comply, fingers flying over keyboards. Within 2 minutes, the system was partitioned. The spreading corruption slowed, buying precious time. Good, Jamal said. Now, I need full access to your base code repository. The original architecture files, before any patches or updates. That's years of proprietary code, the heavy-set engineer protested. We can't just... 27 minutes, Robert interrupted, pointing at the countdown. Give him what he needs. The access was granted. Jamal dove in. His fingers moving across his laptop keyboard with practiced precision. Code scrolled across his screen faster than most people could read, but his eyes tracked every line, every function, every variable. He was hunting for the insertion point, the original wound where the poison had entered. Around him, the operations center had gone quiet. Engineers watched with a mixture of resentment and reluctant fascination as this kid navigated their system with unexpected confidence. Even Dr. Chen found herself impressed by his methodology. He was not guessing or fumbling. He was thinking like a surgeon preparing for a complex operation. There. Jamal said suddenly, pointing at a section of authentication code. That's where it started. See this function? It's supposed to validate user credentials, but someone modified it to also inject malicious code into the validation process itself. Every time the system authenticated a user, it spread the infection a little further. Dr. Chen leaned in, studying the code. Her eyes widened. My God. We reviewed this module 6 months ago. How did we miss that? Because it's subtle, Jamal explained. The malicious code is disguised as a security enhancement. It looks like it belongs there. But watch what happens when I trace its execution. He ran a quick simulation on his laptop. The code flowchart revealed the hidden pathways, the spreading corruption invisible to standard security tools. Brilliant, Dr. Chen breathed. Terrifying, but brilliant. Now comes the hard part, Jamal said. I need to write a counter-algorithm that can hunt down and neutralize every mutation this attack has spawned. It needs to be smart enough to recognize the pattern even as it changes shape, and fast enough to work through the entire system before the timer runs out. Can you write that in 24 minutes? Someone asked skeptically. Jamal was already coding. I'm about to find out. His fingers became a blur. Lines of code appeared on his laptop screen with remarkable speed. He was pulling from techniques he had learned across thousands of hours of self-study, combining concepts from different languages and methodologies in ways that were unconventional but effective. This was not textbook programming. This was jazz, improvisation guided by deep understanding. Dr. Chen watched over his shoulder, occasionally offering suggestions. Despite her initial skepticism, she found herself respecting this kid's approach. He was not trying to brute force a solution. He was being elegant, efficient, creating code that was almost beautiful in its simplicity. But elegant or not, time was running out. The countdown showed 19 minutes. The corrupted data percentage was still climbing. 68%. 69%. Every lost percentage point represented millions of dollars in destroyed information, thousands of disrupted client operations. Robert stood at the back of the room, arms crossed, watching his company's last hope rest in the hands of a 14-year-old whose mother he had never bothered to learn the name of. The irony was not lost on him. He thought about all the times he had walked past Linda in the hallway, never making eye contact, never acknowledging her as a full human being with a life and a family and dreams. She had been invisible to him, part of the background. And by extension so had her brilliant son. What other talent had he overlooked? How many other Jamals were out there, hidden in plain sight because they did not fit the conventional image of genius? The thought was humbling and uncomfortable. Jamal's code was taking shape. The counter-algorithm was complex, multi-layered, designed to spread through the system, just like the attack had, but carrying healing instead of harm. It would identify corrupted sections by their behavioral patterns, isolate them, neutralize the malicious code, and restore the original functionality. In theory and practice often diverged, especially under pressure. Done, Jamal announced, his voice tight with tension. The counter-algorithm is ready. But I need to warn you, once I deploy this, there's no stopping it. If I made a mistake, if the algorithm has bugs, it could make things even worse. We won't know if it works until it's already running through your entire system. The room held its collective breath. Dr. Chen looked at Robert. Robert looked at the countdown. 15 minutes. Do it, Robert said. Jamal's finger hovered over the enter key. This was it. The point of no return. He thought about all the things that could go wrong. All the ways he could have miscalculated. But he also thought about his mother, standing behind him, trusting him completely. He thought about the 8,000 employees depending on this company. He thought about proving that genius could come from anywhere, that someone's zip code or skin color or age did not determine their worth. He pressed enter. The counter algorithm deployed. On the screens around the operations center, engineers watched as Jamal's code spread through the system, a digital antibody hunting its prey. The progress bars updated rapidly. 10% deployed. 20%. 30. At 42%, something went wrong. Error messages flashed. The corruption percentage, which had stabilized, suddenly jumped to 74%. Alarms blared. "It's not working," the heavy-set engineer shouted. "He's killing us faster." "Abort! Abort!" "No." Jamal's voice was sharp. "That's the attack code fighting back. The algorithm is working, it's just triggering a defensive response. We have to let it finish." "How do you know?" Dr. Chen demanded. "How can you be sure?" "Because I designed it to do exactly this," Jamal explained rapidly. "The attack code has defensive mechanisms. When it detects a threat, it tries to accelerate the corruption to complete its job before being stopped. But that acceleration makes it easier to detect and target. It's like shining a flashlight in a dark room. The counter algorithm is using that light to find and destroy every copy." "And if you're wrong?" Robert asked quietly. "Then I'm wrong, but it's too late to stop now." The corruption percentage hit 78%. 79. The point of no return was approaching fast. If it reached 85%, the data loss would be catastrophic and permanent. Game over. Jamal stared at his screen, willing his code to work, to move faster, to be smarter than the attack. He could see the battle playing out in real time. His algorithm was identifying infected sections, but not fast enough. The attack code was fighting back with desperate ferocity. It was a digital war, invisible to the naked eye but absolutely real in its consequences. 80%. Linda closed her eyes, unable to watch. She was praying, something she had not done seriously in years. "Please, God. Please let my baby be right." 82%. Robert felt a strange calm settle over him. This was it. Win or lose, succeed or fail, there was nothing more he could do. For a man who had spent his entire life controlling outcomes, the helplessness was almost liberating. He was not in charge anymore. A teenager he had never met was in charge. The universe had a sense of humor after all. 84%. Then, suddenly, the climb stopped. The corruption percentage froze. For 5 endless seconds, nothing changed. The entire operations center seemed to hold its breath. Then the number dropped. 83%. 82. The counter algorithm had won a major battle, destroying a cluster of attack code. It gained momentum, spreading faster, learning from each victory, adapting its approach. The corruption percentage began falling rapidly. 80%, 75, 70. Jamal allowed himself a tiny smile. "It's working," the room erupted. Not in celebration yet, but in stunned disbelief. They were watching the impossible happen. A system that the best engineers in the industry could not save was being rescued by a teenager with a laptop held together by tape. But the fight was not over. The timer still counted down. 8 minutes remaining. The counter algorithm was winning, but slowly. Too slowly. At this rate, they would run out of time before the restoration completed. Jamal saw the problem. The algorithm was being thorough, checking every section multiple times to ensure complete neutralization. That was good practice in normal situations, but they did not have time for normal practice. He needed to optimize, to make it faster, even if that meant taking some risks. His fingers flew over the keyboard, adjusting parameters, streamlining processes, telling the algorithm to be more aggressive. It was dangerous. If he pushed too hard, he might miss some infected code, and the attack could resurrect itself. But if he did not push hard enough, they would lose by default. The corruption percentage accelerated its decline. 60%. 55. 50. The main systems began coming back online. Transaction processing resumed. Customer databases started responding to queries. In the operations center, consoles that had been dark or error-filled began displaying normal operations. 3 minutes remaining on the countdown. Corruption at 38%. The core infrastructure was clean. The critical data was safe. But the secondary systems still needed work, and those systems handled everything from email to access controls. If they remained corrupted, the company would be crippled even if it survived. "Come on," Jamal whispered, watching his code work. Come on, come on." 2 minutes. 26%. 1 minute. 15%. The heavy-set engineer, who had been among the most skeptical, was now gripping his console and muttering encouragement under his breath. Even he could not deny what he was seeing. This was not luck. This was skill. Remarkable, unprecedented skill. 30 seconds. 8%. The secondary systems were clearing. Email restored. Access controls functional. Network security protocols reinitializing. Everything coming back to life like flowers after rain. 15 seconds. 3%. Jamal's heart hammered so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. So close. They were so incredibly close. 5 seconds. 1%. 3 seconds. 0.3%. 1 second. 0. The corruption percentage hit 0.0% at the exact moment the countdown reached 0. The main screen flashed green. System status. Operational. All critical functions. Online. Data integrity. 99.7%. The lost 0.3% was the original attack code itself, which had been completely neutralized and removed. For a moment, absolute silence filled the operations center. Then, chaos. Beautiful, joyful chaos. Engineers leaped from their chairs, shouting and laughing. Dr. Chen covered her face with her hands, overcome with relief. The heavy-set engineer actually hugged the person next to him. Even Robert allowed himself a genuine smile, the first in what felt like years. Jamal slumped in his chair, exhausted. He had done it. Somehow, impossibly, he had done it. His mother's hands were on his shoulders, and he could feel them shaking. When he looked up at her, tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling wider than he had ever seen. "My baby," Linda whispered. "My brilliant, brave baby." Robert walked to the center console. The entire room gradually quieted as people noticed him approaching. He stopped in front of Jamal, looking down at the teenager who had saved his company. For a long moment, he did not speak. When he finally did, his voice was thick with emotion. "Jamal Carter. I don't know how to thank you. What you just did. I've never seen anything like it." Jamal managed a tired smile. "Just doing what needed to be done, sir." "No," Robert said firmly. "What needed to be done, according to every expert in this building, was impossible. You did the impossible. You saved 8,000 jobs. You saved my company. You saved my legacy." He paused, struggling with unfamiliar emotions. "And you did it when you had every reason not to. We treated you and your mother like you were invisible. We disrespected you. We dismissed you. And yet you helped anyway." Jamal glanced at his mother. "My mom taught me that when someone needs help and you can provide it, you help. No matter what." Linda's hand tightened on his shoulder. She had taught him that. Through her example more than her words, she had shown him that dignity came from how you treated others, not from how they treated you. Robert looked at Linda, really looked at her, probably for the first time in 11 years. "You've raised an extraordinary son." "I know," Linda said simply. "I've always known." Dr. Chen approached, extending her hand to Jamal. "That was remarkable. The way you structured that counter algorithm, the adaptive response mechanisms, the optimization under pressure. I teach at MIT twice a year. I work with graduate students who couldn't have done what you just did." "Where did you learn to code like that?" "Everywhere I could," Jamal admitted. "Free videos online. Library books. Practice problems. I've been teaching myself since I was 10. "Self-taught," Dr. Chen repeated, shaking her head in amazement. "Do you have any idea how rare that is? Real, deep understanding from self-study requires extraordinary discipline and intelligence. You're not just smart, Jamal. You're brilliant." The word hung in the air, brilliant. Jamal had dreamed of being called that. Had hoped that someday, someone would recognize that he was not just a kid who liked computers, but someone with genuine talent. Hearing it from someone like Dr. Chen, in a moment like this, felt surreal. Robert made a decision. It formed in his mind fully developed, and he knew immediately it was right. "Jamal, I want to offer you a position at Mason Tech." The operations center went very quiet. Jamal blinked. "Sir? An internship, technically, since you're only 14. But not a regular internship. I want you working directly with Dr. Chen and our senior engineering team. Learning from them. Teaching them, apparently. With full pay, benefits for your family, and a scholarship fund for your education." Jamal could not speak. His mind had gone blank, unable to process what was happening. This morning he had been invisible. Now the CEO of a $12 billion company was offering him a job. Linda found her voice. Mr. Mason, that's incredibly generous, but Jamal is still in school. He's just a child. A child who just saved my company when my entire expert team couldn't, Robert countered. Mrs. Carter, I'm not suggesting he drop out of school. We'll work around his schedule. Remote work when needed. Flexible hours. But talent like this. He looked back at Jamal. Talent like this is too rare to waste. I spent today learning a very important lesson about how blind I've been. How many incredible people I've overlooked because they didn't fit my narrow expectations. I won't make that mistake again. Starting with your son. Jamal looked at his mother. Linda looked back, tears still flowing, but now she was laughing through them. What do you think, baby? What did he think? He thought this was a dream. He thought he might wake up any second in their small apartment, his alarm clock buzzing, another ordinary day stretching ahead. But his mother's hand on his shoulder was real. The exhaustion in his muscles from the intense concentration was real. The grateful faces surrounding him were real. This was actually happening. I'd be honored, sir, Jamal managed to say. Robert extended his hand. Jamal shook it, surprised by the firm grip, the genuine warmth in the CEO's eyes. This was not a corporate formality. This was respect. Real respect. The operations center erupted in applause. Engineers clapped, whistled, cheered. Some of them had doubted. Most of them had doubted. But doubt had given way to admiration. They had witnessed something extraordinary, and they knew it. In the days that followed, the story of what happened spread through Mason Tech like wildfire. The board of directors, initially furious about the breach in protocol, became strong supporters once they understood what Jamal had accomplished. Industry publications picked up the story. Within a week, Jamal Carter's name was being mentioned alongside the greatest young tech prodigies of the generation. But perhaps the most significant change happened quietly, away from the headlines. Robert Mason, the man who had built an empire on ruthless efficiency and cold calculation, began to see his world differently. He started learning the names of the cleaning staff. He funded scholarship programs for underprivileged students interested in technology. He implemented policies making Mason Tech's internship program accessible to kids from all backgrounds, not just those with connections to prestigious universities. He could not undo years of blindness overnight. But he could try to do better going forward. Jamal had taught him that lesson without even trying, simply by being brilliant when no one expected him to be anything at all. As for Jamal, his life transformed in ways both obvious and subtle. The internship became a gateway to opportunities he had only imagined. He worked with cutting-edge technology, learned from industry leaders, and proved repeatedly that his success that day had not been a fluke. He was the real deal. But more important than the professional opportunities was the simple fact of being seen. Of being recognized. Of walking into Mason Tech headquarters not as the invisible kid whose mother cleaned offices, but as Jamal Carter, engineering intern, valued member of the team. Linda still cleaned offices. She insisted on it, even when Robert offered her other positions. She took pride in her work, and she was not about to change who she was just because her son had become famous in tech circles. But now, when executives passed her in the hallway, they smiled and greeted her by name. They asked about Jamal. They treated her like a person, not a function. It was a small thing, that basic human recognition. But small things could change the world. On a crisp evening 3 months after the crisis, Jamal stood on the 40th floor of Mason Tech headquarters, looking out at the city lights spreading below. Dr. Chen had just finished walking him through a new system architecture they were developing, and she had praised his suggestions. His suggestions. Being taken seriously by people whose talent he admired felt like a dream made real. His mother appeared beside him, having finished her shift. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the city glow. You know what I think about, Linda said finally. I think about how close you came to not speaking up that day. How easy it would have been to stay quiet, to stay safe. Jamal nodded. He thought about that too. One different choice, one moment of letting fear win, and none of this would have happened. The company might have collapsed. Those 8,000 people would have lost their jobs. And he would still be invisible, still be just the cleaning lady's kid. I'm proud of you, Linda continued. Not because you're brilliant, though you are. Not because you saved the company, though you did. I'm proud because when it mattered, you were brave. You risked being wrong, being embarrassed, being rejected. And you did it anyway. That's the real gift, baby. Not the intelligence. The courage. Jamal leaned against his mother, feeling the truth in her words. Intelligence was important, but courage was what let you use it. Courage was what pushed you to step forward, when everything told you to stay back. Behind them, the operations center hummed with activity. Engineers worked on projects that would shape the future of technology. Among them were 3 new interns from backgrounds similar to Jamal's, kids who had never imagined they could work at a place like this. Robert had personally recruited them, determined to find more hidden talents, more Jamals waiting for someone to give them a chance. The world was far from perfect. Poverty still existed. Inequality still existed. One brilliant kid getting an opportunity did not fix systemic problems. But it was a start. A small crack in a very large wall. And sometimes, small cracks were how walls eventually came down. Jamal pulled out his phone and checked his school messages. His physics teacher had assigned a challenging problem set. Before, he would have worked on it alone in his small bedroom. Now, he could use Mason Tech's resources, consult with PhD engineers, access tools and information most high school students never saw. The advantage felt unfair. He knew there were thousands of other kids, just as smart as him, just as capable, who would never get these opportunities. The thought bothered him. What made him special? Nothing, really, except being in the right place at the right time with the right set of skills. Or maybe that was wrong. Maybe what made him special was that when the moment came, when the door cracked open just slightly, he had the courage to push through it even when everyone told him to stay out. "Come on," Linda said, breaking his reverie. "Let's go home. You've got homework, and I've got dinner to make." "Mom," Jamal said as they walked toward the elevator. "Thank you. For what, baby?" "For everything. For working hard so I could have a chance. For believing in me even when I didn't believe in myself. For standing with me that day. For all of it." Linda stopped and pulled her son into a hug. He was almost as tall as she was now, growing fast, but he would always be her baby. "You don't have to thank me for loving you. That's not work. That's just what mothers do." They rode the elevator down in comfortable silence. Outside, the city night embraced them. Somewhere in this vast urban landscape, another brilliant kid was teaching themselves to code on an old computer. Another parent was working multiple jobs to give their child a chance. Another genius was waiting, invisible, for someone to recognize what they could do. The world was full of untapped potential. Full of Jamals. The question was whether anyone would bother to look. Robert Mason had learned to look. He had learned the hard way, nearly losing everything before understanding that talent does not care about zip codes or tax brackets or the color of someone's skin. Talent just exists, waiting to be found, waiting to be nurtured. As Jamal and Linda walked home through streets that suddenly felt full of possibility, neither of them could have predicted where this journey would lead. The internship was just the beginning. In 5 years, Jamal would be heading to Stanford on a full scholarship. In 10, he would be launching his own tech company focused on making technology education accessible to underprivileged communities. In 20, he would be the one giving opportunities to invisible kids, the one recognizing genius where others saw nothing. But all of that was future. Tonight was present. Tonight was a mother and son walking home. Both of them changed by events they could never have anticipated. Tonight was the feeling of being seen, being valued, being given a chance to show the world what they had always known. That greatness can come from anywhere, if only someone is willing to look. In the Mason Tech building behind them, lights burned bright. Engineers worked late, solving problems, building futures. The company Robert had nearly lost was thriving again, stronger for having faced near destruction. And in the center of it all, in spirit, if not in body, was a 14-year-old kid who had reminded everyone what really mattered. Not the money. Not the power. Not the prestige. What mattered was what you did when someone needed help. What mattered was courage in the face of doubt. What mattered was recognizing that the person who saves you might not look like what you expect, might not come from where you expect, might not fit any of your preconceptions about what a hero should be. Sometimes the hero is just a kid with a laptop held together by tape, who decided that today, right now, in this moment, someone had to try. And that someone might as well be him.